I still remember the night it happened, the night my son looked at me like I was a stranger. It started like any other family dinner. I had roasted chicken, the same recipe George, my late husband, used to love. Rosemary, garlic, that warm, buttery smell that used to fill the whole house. I thought it might remind us what home used to mean. Chelsea, my daughter-in-law, barely looked at the table. "Oh, Doris," she said, smirking, "you still cook like it's the 80s. Maybe try something modern next time." Ryan laughed a little too quickly. "She's joking, Mom." But she wasn't. I could tell. Her smile never reached her eyes. I smiled back anyway, pretending her words didn't sting. I'd spent years learning that silence kept dinners peaceful, even when it burned my dignity to ash. But that night, I made a mistake. I spoke up. "Chelsea," I said softly, "please stop moving my plants. They need sunlight where they are." She didn't even look up from her phone. "They block the light, Doris. This is our house too." I froze. "Our house?" She looked up then, her tone sweet and cold all at once. "We pay bills now. I think that counts." I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Ryan slammed his hand against the table. "Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house." The room went dead silent. Even the clock stopped ticking, as if it couldn't bear to mark the moment my heart cracked. Chelsea smiled. Small, satisfied, cruel. I looked at my son, waiting for a hint of remorse, some flicker of the boy who once brought me wildflowers after school. But he looked away. That's when I realized this wasn't my home anymore, not in their eyes. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table long after they'd gone upstairs. Their laughter drifted through the ceiling, light and cruel. The house I had built, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, had turned into something foreign. I thought about the early years. George and I working from dawn to dusk, saving every penny. I baked bread, sewed dresses, cleaned other people's homes just to buy this one. When we moved in, George had said, "One day, this house will keep our family safe." He didn't know that walls can't protect you from betrayal. Every corner now felt haunted by voices that weren't mine. I told myself peace was better than pride, that keeping quiet was easier than fighting. But as I sat in that kitchen, my hands trembling over the cold table, I realized silence could also be surrender. And maybe that night was the first time I started to see my silence for what it was. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you're subscribed to Tangled Heart Stories and have the bell turned on. Here, we share stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption, the kind that remind us it's never too late to take our power back. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments below, because sometimes the stories we share are mirrors of our own. The days after that dinner felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I tried to stay out of their way. I told myself that as long as we weren't fighting, maybe we were fine. But peace built on humiliation isn't peace. It's quiet suffering. Chelsea started changing things. Small at first. The living room rug disappeared, replaced with something gray and modern. The floral curtains I'd picked with George vanished overnight. Then the family photos were gone, replaced by abstract paintings that meant nothing. One afternoon, I came home from the store to find Chelsea's friends in my living room, drinking wine and laughing loudly. "Oh, Doris," she said when she saw me. "We're just having a little get-together. Hope you don't mind." I looked around at the mess, the laughter, the spilled wine on the table George had built with his own hands. "As long as someone cleans up," I said quietly. One of her friends giggled. "She's adorable." Chelsea smirked. "She's traditional." I stood there, groceries in my arms, realizing I didn't belong in my own house anymore. That night, I washed the dishes slowly, staring out the window at the dark yard. Ryan never said a word to defend me, and sometimes silence hurts more than cruelty. A few days later, I found Ryan in the garage, sitting in George's old chair. "Ryan," I said softly, "can we talk?" He sighed. "Mom, please don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I feel like a ghost here." He rubbed his forehead. "Chelsea's trying to make this house comfortable for both of us. You're too sensitive." I stared at him. "She's taking over everything, Ryan." "You can't even see it." He stood abruptly. "You always think people are against you. Maybe you're the problem." And then he left, just like that. I stayed in the garage long after, my hand resting on George's chair. I thought about all the nights we spent planning this home, how proud he'd been of our boys, and I wondered if he'd still be proud now. Then came the day of the roses. They'd been George's favorite, 15 years old, still blooming red every summer. That morning, I looked out the window and froze. The garden was bare. I ran outside. "Chelsea, where are my roses?" She didn't even flinch. "I told the landscaper to remove them. They were dying." "They were my husband's," I said. "They were weeds," she replied. "I want something clean and fresh." Something inside me broke, but not the way it used to. It wasn't pain anymore. It was clarity. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the empty garden. The air felt colder. That's when I realized they weren't just trying to live with me. They were trying to live after me. Scott, my younger son, called that week. "Mom, you sound off. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. He hesitated. "Ryan's been posting pictures. The house doesn't look like your house anymore." I smiled sadly. "It isn't." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You always told us dignity isn't loud, Mom. But sometimes silence isn't dignity. It's surrender." His words stayed with me long after the call ended. Days later, I overheard Chelsea talking to her sister, Linda. "You can't keep waiting," Linda said. "Get the house signed over. She won't say no forever." Chelsea laughed softly. "She always gives in. She just needs a little push." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. They were planning to take the last thing I had, the roof over my head, the memory of my husband, the proof of every sacrifice I ever made. That night, I opened the wooden box George had left me. Inside was the house deed and a letter in his handwriting. If they ever forget, remind them who built this home and who has the right to protect it. I read that line over and over, and then I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called a locksmith. When he asked why, I said, "Because it's time." By evening, the locks were changed. Every door, every handle, every key. When Ryan and Chelsea came home, they couldn't get in. They knocked, they shouted, they begged. "Mom, what's going on?" I sat in the living room, holding George's letter. I didn't say a word. Chelsea's voice cracked. "You can't do this. This is our house," I whispered to myself. Not anymore. For the first time in years, the house was quiet again. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. And as I turned off the lights, I felt peace. Not the fragile peace of silence, but the solid peace of standing my ground. That night, after I locked them out, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with George's letter in my lap, listening to the rain tap against the windows. It wasn't guilt that kept me awake. It was stillness, the kind that comes after years of noise. Around 2 a.m., I heard Ryan's car engine fade down the road. For a long while, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the beating of my own heart. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I felt something stronger than sadness. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. The next morning, I made coffee the way George used to like it, strong enough to wake the dead. I sat by the window, staring at the empty garden where the roses once stood. For the first time, I didn't see emptiness. I saw space. Space for something new to grow. By noon, Ryan showed up alone. He looked exhausted, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. I opened the door halfway. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "What's going on? Why would you do this?" I took a deep breath, because I needed to remind you whose house this is, whose blood built it. He looked down at the floor. "Chelsea's humiliated. She called the police last night." "I know," I said. "They came, and they told her the same thing I'll tell you now. I'm the legal owner. You're both guests here." He flinched. "You didn't have to go this far." "Didn't I?" I said softly. "I begged you to see me, to stand up for me. Instead, you watched while she tore this home apart piece by piece." He rubbed his temples. "You don't understand. Chelsea's under a lot of pressure." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't make excuses for her, or for yourself." His eyes hardened. "You've turned into someone I don't recognize." I smiled sadly. Maybe I finally turned into the woman I should have been all along. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rattled the porch screen. Then he muttered, "I'll talk to Chelsea. We'll figure something out." "Take your time," I said, "but until you do, neither of you are welcome here." He stared at me, disbelief flickering into anger. "You're choosing pride over family." "No," I said. "I'm choosing self-respect. There's a difference." He left without another word. When the door closed, I felt both heartbreak and relief in the same breath. The next day, I met with a lawyer, a kind older man named Mr. Lawson. He'd known George from church years ago. "You're doing the right thing," he said after reading through the deed. "Your ownership is clear. But if you want to protect yourself further, I suggest a living will and updated beneficiary documents." He handed me a form. I hesitated, then asked, "What happens if I leave it to a foundation instead of family?" He raised an eyebrow. "You could. It's your right." When I left his office, the autumn air bit at my cheeks. I walked past a park where mothers pushed strollers, where children laughed. And I realized something. The title of mother doesn't mean endless forgiveness. It means teaching your children boundaries, even when it hurts. That weekend, Linda, Chelsea's sister, showed up at my door. Her perfume reached me before her words did. "Doris," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, "we're all a little concerned. Maybe you're overreacting?" I opened the door just enough to see her, not enough to let her in. "Overreacting?" "Yes," she continued. "You've got a nice family, a roof over your head, people who care about you. Don't ruin that over pride." "Pride," I repeated. "You know what pride is, Linda? It's all I have left when respect is gone." Her face stiffened. "Chelsea just wants peace." "No," I said quietly. "Chelsea wants possession." For a moment, Linda didn't know what to say. I saw the flicker of discomfort behind her polished smile. "You're making a mistake," she said finally. "I already made one," I replied. "I let you people in." I shut the door. This time, I didn't shake afterward. That evening, I cooked dinner for one. I didn't cry over the empty chairs. I set one plate, one glass, one fork, and for the first time in months, I ate in peace. Later that night, I got a text from Ryan. "Mom, we're staying with friends. I just want to talk, please." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I typed, "When you're ready to listen, not talk, come home." And I meant it. A week passed. I spent my mornings cleaning and my afternoons reading by the window. Every so often, I'd catch myself humming while I cooked, a habit I thought I'd lost years ago. One evening, as I watered the garden, I noticed something. A tiny green sprout pushing through the dirt where the roses had once been. It wasn't much, just a small bud, but it was alive. I smiled. "You're early," I whispered. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since George died. The next morning, I found a note slipped under the door. It was from Ryan. "I can't defend what I said. You didn't deserve that. Chelsea's been crying every night. She wants to apologize. Can we come home?" I folded the note, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't know yet if forgiveness was possible, but I knew one thing for certain. This time, they'd walk through my door on my terms. I placed the note beside George's letter on the table and whispered, "You were right, love. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember who you are." Then I poured myself another cup of coffee and watched the morning light spread across the floor like a promise. A few days after Ryan's note, I heard the sound of their car pulling up outside. My heart thudded, but I stayed seated, staring at the cup of tea in my hands until the knock came. "Mom?" Ryan's voice was cautious. "Can we come in?" I stood, walked slowly to the door, and opened it just enough to see them both standing there. Ryan, pale and tired, Chelsea's mascara smudged like someone who hadn't slept in days. She was holding a small box, the kind used for jewelry or keepsakes. "May we come in?" she asked softly. I studied her for a long moment. Her tone was different, stripped of arrogance, almost trembling. I opened the door fully. "Come in," I said, "but before you step across that threshold, you'll listen." They both nodded. "This house," I began quietly, "was built by your father's hands and my sacrifice. Every wall here holds a piece of our lives, our laughter, our fights, our dreams. But lately, it's been filled with something else. Contempt. I won't live in contempt again." Ryan's shoulders slumped. Chelsea looked down. "I didn't mean for things to go that far," she whispered. I turned to her. "Didn't you? You uprooted my roses. You mocked my food. You turned my son against me. And then you called this your house." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was wrong. I was angry, jealous. I thought you judged me. I thought you'd never accept me." "Acceptance," I said evenly, "is earned through respect, not fear." Ryan tried to reach for my hand. "Mom, we made terrible mistakes. Please, we just want to fix it." I looked at their faces, two people who'd once made this house feel small, and for the first time, I saw them not as villains, but as broken people who'd forgotten gratitude. "Sit down," I said. "We're going to talk about how this goes from now on." We sat at the same kitchen table where the shouting had once split my heart. Only this time, my voice was steady. "First," I began, "you don't live here anymore. This is my home. If you want to visit, you ask. You knock. You respect the space." Ryan nodded, eyes wet. "Second," I continued, "Chelsea, if you ever speak to me with contempt again, once, even once, you'll never set foot through this door again." She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "And third," I said, "this house will go where it belongs when I'm gone. Not to you, not to any child, but to a foundation that helps women rebuild their lives after betrayal. Because I need this home to mean something more than pain." Ryan looked up sharply. "Mom?" I raised a hand. "Don't. This is not punishment. It's a lesson. Money, walls, Furniture, they're nothing without respect. He swallowed hard, nodding. I understand. Chelsea finally spoke, her voice shaking. I brought something. She opened the small box. Inside was a tiny rose sapling, its roots wrapped carefully in damp soil. I thought maybe, she hesitated, we could plant it where the others were, to start over. I stared at it for a moment, then stood. Come with me. Outside, the garden was still scarred from the day she tore the old bushes out. The soil was uneven, but the air smelled clean after the morning rain. We knelt together in silence. Chelsea's hands were trembling as she dug the small hole. Ryan stood nearby, watching us like he was afraid to breathe. When she placed the sapling into the ground, I steadied it with my hands. George used to say roses are stubborn. They survive anything, frost, neglect, even being cut down, but only if they're cared for with honesty. Chelsea nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll take care of it, she whispered. I know you will, I said quietly. We covered the roots with soil. Our hands were dirty, but something about it felt cleansing. Later, back inside, Chelsea stood by the doorway. I can't ask you to forgive me, she said, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it. Forgiveness, I said, isn't a gift, it's a garden. You water it or it dies. She looked at me, eyes glistening. Then I'll water it. When she and Ryan left that afternoon, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter, the kind of lightness that comes after setting something heavy down at last. That evening, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, I walked to the garden alone. The new rose sapling stood upright, defiant. I brushed the dirt from my hands and whispered, You're home now. For the first time in years, the house behind me didn't feel like a prison. It felt alive again. I stood there, listening to the wind in the branches, and thought of all the women who'd written to me over the years, friends, neighbors, even strangers, telling me their stories of loss and quiet strength. Maybe, someday, this house could help them too. And as the last light faded, I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The house feels different now. The air moves more softly through the rooms, like it's finally breathing again. I wake up to quiet mornings, filled with sunlight spilling across the floor, and for the first time in years, that light doesn't make me ache. It makes me grateful. I still make coffee for two sometimes. Old habits. I set George's cup out beside mine, though it's empty. Then I look out the window at the little rose sapling in the garden. It's taken root, defiant and alive. The leaves have grown wider. A single bud is forming at the tip, red as memory. People think peace means nothing happens anymore, but peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of truth. And the truth is, I finally stood up for myself. A week after they left, I got a letter in the mail. The return address said Ryan Miller. I hesitated before opening it. My heart beat too fast for something so small. Mom, it began, I know I hurt you. I wish I could say I didn't mean it, but I did. I believed what I wanted to believe because it was easier than admitting I'd changed. Chelsea's been different since we left, softer. We've been talking, really talking. She said planting that rose made her feel something she hasn't felt in a long time. Shame and hope, both at once. She wants to try again. So do I. We'll respect your space until you say otherwise. I just hope someday we can sit together at that table again. Not as owner and guest, but as mother and son. I read it twice before folding it neatly and placing it beside George's letter in the wooden box. Two voices from the men I loved most, one from the past, one from the present. each reminding me what love is supposed to protect. I didn't write back right away. Some wounds need silence to heal, not words. In the afternoons, I started volunteering at the community center downtown. There's a small program for widows, women like me, who've lost their homes, their partners, or simply their sense of place. One woman, Lorraine, told me her daughter-in-law had moved her into a basement after her husband died. She said it's just temporary, Lorraine whispered, her hands trembling. But it's been 3 years. I took her hands in mine and said quietly, "You deserve sunlight, Lorraine. Don't let anyone bury you while you're still alive." She cried, and I cried with her. Maybe that's what healing really is, helping someone else stand up when you finally can. Sometimes, at night, I still think about that moment at the dinner table, the sound of Ryan's hand slamming down, his voice like thunder, "Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house." It used to echo in my head like a curse. Now it feels like a turning point. The moment I realized silence can be another kind of violence, when you allow others to write you out of your own story. I won't let that happen again. One morning, Chelsea came alone. I saw her car pull up from the kitchen window. She stood at the gate for a long time, holding a basket of bread. I opened the door before she could knock. "I baked these," she said, holding out the basket. "They're not as good as yours, but I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For letting me make things right. For not slamming the door when you could have." I nodded slowly. "People make mistakes, Chelsea, but the real test is what they do after." She took a breath. "I still want to come by sometimes, just to visit. Maybe learn how you make your roast chicken." I smiled faintly. "We'll see." She smiled back, a little shaky, but genuine. Then she glanced toward the garden. "It's growing." "It is," I said. "Everything does when it's finally in the right soil." That evening, I stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching the rose as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky was painted in bruised gold, the kind of color George always loved. I thought about how life circles back, not to where we were, but to who we were meant to be all along. I whispered, almost to myself, "You can't buy dignity." It's what I'd told Linda that day, and it still feels like the truest thing I've ever said. Dignity isn't given by blood or earned by pleasing others. It's claimed quietly, the way a flower pushes through soil after a long winter. And maybe that's the real inheritance I'll leave behind. Not the house, not the money, but the message written in its walls, that love without respect is a cage, and silence in the face of cruelty is surrender. But standing your ground, with calm, with grace, is how you take your life back. As I finish writing this, the air outside smells of rain. Tomorrow the rose might bloom, or it might not. But I know this, it will try. And so will I, because I am not just a mother or a widow or a woman who lost her home once. I am the keeper of what's mine, my peace, my worth, my story, and I will never let anyone take that from me again. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if someone has made you question your worth, remember this: you don't have to shout to reclaim your dignity. Sometimes you just have to close the door, breathe, and say, "Not anymore." If this story spoke to you, leave a comment below. Have you ever had to fight quietly for your own respect? I'd love to hear from you. And before you go, make sure you're subscribed to Tangled Heart Stories and turn on the bell icon. Here, we believe every woman deserves her voice, her peace, and her justice, one story at a time.